So sometimes it just takes a little. Shannon doesn't have that problem. He just flips the page. Yep, I like that. There's days I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but it just, I don't know, it just works. Anyway, let's pray, and we'll talk some more about Exodus. Father, thank you again for the Sabbath, for bringing us here safely for this beautiful day. Lord, it's beautiful, not just the sunshine and the slightly cooler temps that bring just a creature comfort, but it's beautiful because it's your day that you made for us. It's your day that you rested, not because you were tired, but because you wanted us to understand and what you already know, that rest is important like work is, and that not just our sleep, but a completely different type of rest. A rest where we spend more time with you, whether that's here at Sabbath school or church or with you in nature, with you in solitude. I think of the time Jesus spent the 40 days in the wilderness, and depending on when he went, that's 6 or 7 Sabbaths in addition to the regular and days. And we just thank you, Lord, that you think of us that way. And as we study some topics that make it feel differently, help us to keep that truth ever present in our minds. In your name, amen. All right, so Living the Law is the title of this one. And I was like, oh, I thought this was Leviticus. I don't know if anybody else felt that way. I mean, you know, you read Exodus and you've read Exodus and it's, you know, the big exciting stories and the 10 Commandments come and then, oh yeah, then they kind of moved on and there's some other things. But, you know, right after the 10 Commandments are some of these other chapters here that you don't hear much about, do you? And if you're like me, as I'm studying this week, I'm kind of going, oh, now I see why. Because you read some of it and you're like, what? Really? And I honestly don't know what to do for the Sabbath school on some level. Because it's kind of uncomfortable. And it's, you know, last week, the 10 Commandments, I thought we did all right. I thought, you know, okay, we got this. This feels different. It feels a little different. And I'm very curious to see where we go, honestly, and where we're led today and what our discussion will be about. But our memory text says from Exodus 20, the Lord said to Moses, and I'm sorry, I forgot that first word. Then the Lord said to Moses. So this is after he spoke his 10 words and his 10 commandments. Then he says, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. So he's saying to the children of Israel, you have seen that I talked with you from heaven. Because remember the story, remember the history there, even in the Charlton Heston version, the children of Israel knew that God was there. They knew this was God's mountain. And they saw differences, right? And even when Moses comes down, right, and his face is aglow. And if you haven't seen that yet, it's kind of cool. Go over to the Augustana University campus. They've got the marble statue of Moses after he's received the 10 Commandments, and he has horns in his head. And if you don't know that story, it's because they don't have vowels. And so that glow on his face, if you put in different vowels, it says horns. So depending on which vowels you put in, and I think it was Michelangelo who did that one, and that was the interpretation. So Moses actually has horns. So it's not because he's a devil, it's just because when you do the Hebrew, that's the deal. But it's a pretty cool statue if you've never seen it. And it's right here in Sioux Falls. We have him there. We have David down at Faywick Park. But anyway, but that's the deal, right? The children of Israel know this. And then he says, you shall not make anything to be with me. Gods of silver, gods of gold, you shall not make for yourselves. So kind of reiterating and getting it going about the thou shalt have no other gods before me, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. And then he's kind of coming along here as in this lesson saying, okay, those are principles, those are pretty easy to get, but let's spell it out a little more. So when I'm reading this, it talks about God desired his people to be different from the surrounding nations. These laws that we're going to talk about today, why? Do they apply to us? Do they not apply to us? Is it, I mean, are we supposed to pull out the principles? Are we supposed to look at them? I mean, because you read our lesson, this is the eye for the eye, right? This is for, life for life. This is stone them, kill them if they do X or do Y. I mean, we have some of our laws on our books in this country that follow this and then don't follow this, and we change it and all. So what do we do with these?
Gives us a really strong hint into that. The minds of these people, blinded and debased by slavery and heathenism, were not prepared to appreciate fully the far-reaching principles of God's Ten Commandments. So apparently God felt the need to provide additional instruction for them to help them navigate a new life of freedom, actually, that they had never known.
It's interesting, right? When you, I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you can do whatever you want. I remember as a kid, my mom's best friend's dad owned a cookie company. And they had a little outlet store or whatever. They make them in the back, and then in the front you can buy cookies. I remember the first time I went there, and there's a lady who'd been there forever. And I walked in, I'd never been there, but I heard about, Mr. Jack's Cookie Company. And she says, well, honey, down in Louisiana, she goes, well, honey, just get whatever cookies you want. And, well, I mean, look at me. What do you think? I went nuts. I'm just getting cookies, and I'm like, Mom, really? And she's like, sure. I mean, this is Mr. Jack's. This is his place. He just wants you to have cookies. And I'm like, okay. So, I mean, I'll take two of, you're just doing your thing. And it's just like, this is so cool, right? And we get all said and done. My mom says, now you got to pay. And I was like, oh. Somebody told me that. And I said, well, how much is it to the lady? She goes, well, all of those? That's a nickel. I had to be taught later the value of money in that situation. But, I mean, it was just it's kind of like putting the kid in the candy store and going nuts. I mean, that was that experience for me right there. I mean, temperance, you only need one. What is that? Forget about that. So it's, to me, when I read this week, it kind of reminded me of that. Yeah, they needed more. So do we need more? That's what I'm at. I mean, I kind of want to hear what you were thinking about this, because I'm not sure where to go with it. We haven't been in this country, 400 years of slavery and this immaturity as a nation, like, we're just reading here. Heathenism, we're surrounded by that, blinded by that. Are we in the same situation? Or is it a different, I mean, how do we deal with this, and how do we deal with the laws that are given next? Were there any that bothered you? When you read the next set of laws outside the 10 or in addition to the 10, were they like, what? But having this debate quite a bit recently with, I think most of you know I'm on a board out in California, and a very different milieu of culture there with the immigration status and, et cetera, doing things illegally, doing things morally right or wrong. Where do those two things tie in together? How does this work? It's an interesting perspective depending on who you are, who you're surrounded by, how you view what's morally right and morally wrong. And some of the things I was reading here this week, as I'm going through some of these laws in Exodus, I'm going, wow, that's an interesting law. Or would I believe that today if someone came and, killed someone in my family and I just went out and stoned them and killed them back? Am I justified to do that? Can I do that? Is that the right thing to do? I mean, that's what this says you're supposed to do. Not supposed to, or you can? How did you work on this week? I'm just curious. Rather than debating each one of them, I was thinking about, principles behind this. So I get what you're saying. They're coming out of slavery. These 10 aren't going to be enough. It's just like a kid, right? I reflected that story I just told you, and I thought my mom should rein me in. You could pick 5. Give me a rule, right? Keep me under control a little bit better there. I get a sense that's what God's doing with these sets of laws. But how many of these laws do we hold on to and use today, or bring out today when it's convenient? And is it any different? Are the principles behind these laws any different than the 10? Did you find anything that disagreed with on some level? I don't know. Shannon?
The part where it said if a person beats his slave and he dies, then the slave owner needs to be punished. But if he survives for a couple days, then he's good because he's his property.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I struggle with all the same things you did about this stuff. It's you try and square it with how we believe we're supposed to live, and it's tough.
Is it? I had the same thought that came back to me this week. Well, again, the surrounding nations. We're just not going to be as bad as them. They felt a little bit of that, right? They're worse, but it didn't feel like this was an ideal that was set, right? Like that one, it was like
minimum bar, maybe. Right. I don't know.
Right, and almost like what we would say a compromise. You go ahead and beat someone, but if they don't die, well, no big deal.
Well, and there's the other weird one that if you, what is it? It's even, I think it's farther along, but if you murder someone, but you're able to run to a city of refuge,
right,
then you're fine.
Yeah.
Right? If they catch you, then they can kill you.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Right. And I mean, it talked about, oxen goring you. I mean, there was a lot of interesting things here. And as you're reading through them, there were a few of them were like, yeah, okay. And then others were like, oh, not that. And I thought to myself, I wonder if we're all sitting in the room talking about each and every one of these. I bet we wouldn't all agree on each and every one of them. There's going to be a line for each one of us in certain situations that we're going to not be okay with. I doubt we're going to have agreement. So where do we go with that? So when it talks about the code of the covenant, this also becomes very interesting. So I want to get into this a little bit, and rather than debating the actual laws at the moment, this is where it becomes interesting. And I don't know if this is the Greek or what they're trying to say, but this is a code of the covenant, meaning in the 10 Commandments, as I understand it, this is not a covenant per se. This is more of a, here's the deal. This is what you're going to do. This is how it works. This is the way you should live. I'm your creator, right? This is the good way to go. This is more of a, you are my people. If you agree to this, right? If you want to be my people, then you need to do these things. And you're like, okay, got it. I agree to that. It's not necessarily the salvation moral side, but there's a back and forth on some level. So that's why they call it the Code of the Covenant. And it was that way because, notice, it was the responsibility of the judges to watch over these laws and apply them correctly. Notice the difference here. This was up to the judges, human beings, to apply the law, the enforcement of these laws correctly and what they meant, not God. The 10 Commandments are God's laws. He judges on those. These are, for this society, for this situation, these are the things, and the judges decide, humans decide. It's not an eternal type thing. And I don't know, Chad, that explains the one where you can run to the city and get away. You can escape man's judgment, but you don't necessarily escape God's, right? So this is the price you pay. This is how it works. Because even if you have to run to that sanctuary city, as it's called, maybe you keep your life, but you don't have your family anymore because they're not there. And I don't know how that works. Is that different than our jails today? And over a certain period of time, I don't know all the details, and we're not told all the details. But it says the obligations of the Decalogue may be fully understood. Interestingly, and enforced, additional precepts were given, illustrating and applying the principles of the Ten Commandments. And these laws were called judgments because they framed an infinite wisdom. I'm reading on to what Shannon read earlier. And equity, and because the magistrates were to give judgment according to them. Unlike the Ten Commandments, they were delivered privately to Moses, who was to communicate them to the people. I had a really weird feeling reading that. Because we're going to enforce the Ten Commandments. And I was just, I don't know, anybody else? Or that was just me picking up on a word, or that's just kind of how it's said?
Well, it's more similar to what you see with Sharia law, where the government is part of the enforcer of the religious code. And the Western world hasn't been that way for a long time, since probably the Spanish Inquisition, or when, Catholicism ruled Europe.
Yeah. And so that's where it feels a little off, huh? Yeah. No, thank you. That makes sense.
But I mean, actually, you don't have to go that far back. I mean, even now that I say that, I remember growing up that you go into the grocery store, and on Sundays, the liquor section of the store would be chained off and locked.
Absolutely.
You will not buy liquor on the Lord's Day.
I was just visiting a friend in Oregon a year ago, and it's the same way. We walked into the little market where he goes on Sunday morning to get his paper. He says, come on, let's go get the paper. So we walked over there, and I was like, what's this? I mean, there was literally a chain link fence with a lock, a full-on padlock lock. And he goes, oh, you can't buy booze here on Sunday. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's still happening from that perspective, from that angle, sure. Yeah. And there's more laws on the books. Yes, Karen?
I used to work for Walmart, so I saw a lot of changes going on. And I remember when they started, I worked on self-checkouts, and I had to watch everybody. Now it's not quite so bad because they have security there every day, and they're going up and down the aisles, or they're driving up and down in the parking lot to make sure no one gets hurt.
Yeah.
And I think God is there protecting them. And then this other thing I remember, when we would go to church, we'd go to church on Wednesday night and prayer meeting. And then my dad would take us to Dairy Queen for a treat.
Yeah.
So we got to do that. And then one more thing, that fentanyl they advertise that on TV too. You lose your teeth, you lose your hair, you just look terrible, and the biggest thing you see is death because you're just worn, your body's all worn out. And I could go on and on. I could probably write a book, but I won't do that because I've had suicides on both sides of the family.
Sure.
And so I'm holding in there because God, the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Ghost is protecting me and protecting our church.
Yeah.
Because the churches are being attacked. The Catholic churches are. And that's really sad.
It is. Well, and it goes back to what this message is about, right? About understanding that we're not in that same situation coming out of Egypt. That's what I was saying. We're here. But what is it going to boil down to? It's different. Some of these things have changed. Yet some of these laws, like I said, sort of, okay, I get that one, but boy, I don't understand this one. So what is this all about? Yes?
think the other thing to keep in mind is that even, I mean, we're so advanced supposedly as a nation, we are still struggling with what is the correct punishment to hand out to people who strike or harm someone else. Like, one of these is, if you hit a pregnant woman but she doesn't lose the child, oh, well, it's okay, you're just going to be fine.
Right.
I think we would be like, lock that person up.
Right.
But we also see that many of our methods of incarcerating people for many, many years, it does remove them from society, but are we really fixing the problem? No, we're not fixing the problem.
Right.
People get out and they commit crimes again. We don't have the solution right now, so it's also hard to look back and say, these rules that were set up in an era when there were no jails,
Right.
they didn't have the ability to, you have to have a fairly wealthy society to be able to pay to house someone indefinitely, feed them, take care of them, lock them up, guard them, while the rest of society is trying to make money and grow crops and survive.
Right.
So we look at this and we're like, oh, how could you have these rules? And it's like, well, different situation.
Totally different situation, and that's where to try to apply it to today is very hard. And that's why we look at some of these things and it's very uncomfortable. That's why I was talking about the sanctuary cities, or whether that's the actual name, or I'm mixing up with today's stuff. But the idea was, you knew that, and you knew that's where these criminals went, so you didn't go there. But again, why would you in that culture, in that society? You're agricultural. Like you just said, you're out there growing your crops, you got your land, you're trying to keep everything going to survive. You're not going to worry about that murderer who ran off and is gone now. You're just glad they're gone, and that's one less thing you got to deal with, right? I mean, that's sort of the process here, and it's hard for us to picture that. But if I hadn't committed a crime and I knew there was a city where all these people had gone that were murderers, I don't think I'd go, I'm leaving my farm and go hang out with them. I mean, we don't picture that because we don't experience that or see that.
Isn't that a little bit of a form of self-incarceration?
Yeah.
I mean, if you kill somebody, if you want to live, you better be in that city.
Yep.
Because if we catch you out of that city, we're going to kill you.
Right.
So,
It
has kind of the feel of a penitentiary. It's like,
Yeah.
So you guys, all you murderers, go live together with each other over there.
Yeah. See how that turns out.
Yeah. See how that turns out.
Right.
And if we catch you out of the city,
right,
you're fair game.
Right. To be disciplined.
Yes.
The judges will decide, and you may actually be killed in some. Absolutely, that could happen to you. It's something we have a hard time understanding. Like you say, we're trying to apply today with reading what that means and somehow saying, oh, well, then we need to keep doing it here too. So we don't do that, but we pull it out when we feel convenient. So when we're looking at these, the Code of the Covenant is described in several chapters. It's interesting when we hit Monday's Law. It says, in God's mercy, he taught the judges how to deal with people in various situations regarding property rights. It says several cases were enumerated, indicating what to do if a bull attacked a neighbor's bull, if people stole a domestic animal and sold it, if animals grazed on the field or vineyard of another owner, if an item or person borrowed was stolen from them, or if a hired animal was injured or died. When you read those, what principle did you pull out that seemed to be the theme that ran through them all? I'm just curious. As you read through those, what I was pulling away was, if you took responsibility for it, then if something happened, it was your responsibility to make it right. Basically, right?
It's not like what we sometimes deal with now in society, where the person who's the wealthiest or the strongest, if they can lawyer up and tie you up in court, they'll just get away with whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And this kind of levels the playing field and says, hey, look, if you cause them to lose this animal, you gotta pay for it.
Gotta make it right.
Yeah.
Again, I'd like to come out with stories of things that I remember having. I remember my kids playing, and there was a friend over, the parents were there, kicked a little ball in the house, whatever, broke a little ceiling fixture, and the dad and I, who were friends, it was, she goes, oh, I broke this. It's like, well, you're going to have to get, Ned a new one. It was $2 at the hardware store, right? And the moms are like, oh, just let it go, let it go. And I'm not knocking men and women when I say that. That's not a judgment. It was just, that's what happened. And, well, she didn't mean to, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it was like, hold on. This is the dads, and we're trying to help her understand this lesson. And she doesn't have money. We know where the money's going to come from. But it's like, this is what was going on. And, yeah, you may not have meant to, but you did that. Even if you didn't mean to, you make it right. It's like when my dad, I remember teaching me, if you ever borrow somebody's car, what happens? It goes back to them full of gas and washed. I remember Shannon and I have had that conversation. It's part of what you do. And if you break something while that's happening, but if they're like, take it, it doesn't matter, nothing, you know, it's being honorable. And that's what I read when I read these laws. It wasn't meant, on some level, it wasn't meant to be completely literal. People could forgive and show mercy, whatever, but it gave the guidelines for the judges. And the guidelines are what? When it's saying this in Monday's lesson, what is God teaching them?
Don't take advantage of other people.
Exactly. And you're going to think, I can't do it, I can't figure this out. Hey, guess what? If you borrow, if you do this, if you do that, that in and of itself has an implied covenant of, I will take care of this, I will treat it as my own, if something happens, I will fix it, type concept. That's what I read. And then there were some that were like weird. But it must have had something to do with the culture, right? It just didn't ring to us, so maybe we don't quite get it. But that's the principle I saw, yes.
I still that goes back to the fundamental issue of, if these are laws, and Jesus said, I didn't come to change a single letter in a single law, then why do we not follow them, including, you know, the ones that are in the later part of Monday's lesson, which are the festivals. Like I never participated in any of these festivals that are written, so are we in violation of the law? And, you know, it does seem that conveniently as Christianity pick and choose which parts of the Old Testament we like to read and which ones we like to ignore. It's interesting.
It is. And I know, and I remember reading some of these things in books and things since, where the law means the Ten Commandments, not these other laws. We've heard that. You know, God's moral law, God's Ten Commandments, the sanctuary laws, you know, different things like that, yes.
So I did just look that up, though, and in at least Hebrew, and according to, you know, Jewish tradition and Torah, there is no difference between the word rules and laws. So when Jesus said, I came to make no change to the law, he didn't really differentiate Ten Commandments versus all this other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't we then follow them? Should we still follow them? I mean, when it comes into this, then, I mean, we'll throw it out there, right? Where it talks about, I mean, it's talking about slaves, and we would never think that's even an option. I mean, if you're going to talk about keeping slaves, then you're implying on some level that having slaves is okay. And I don't know who thinks that's okay. Is God saying that's okay? Yes.
I wasn't really going to answer that question. So
Okay, go ahead, Bill, with what you're going to say.
Well,
I'll get back to
the chats. I mean, we know the New Testament says that there was some law that was nailed to the cross when Jesus died.
Okay.
And the veil was torn from top to bottom. And later, Paul talks about the handwriting of ordinances that were against you and things like that. So we know there's some differentiation that even Paul understood and whatever. And the people back then probably understood the difference between the Ten Commandments and, you know, the ordinances, I would guess. Which I would classify these as. But.
And it's interesting because our author, as it's describing this, talks about these as the code of the covenant, the judgments, right? Is that different than God's moral law? Is that what he's doing? And when is Jesus saying that? When is that coming out? Is that about if you look on a woman, you're breaking the seventh commandment? You know, didn't exactly say that. Well, I didn't come to change that. I'm just helping you understand what it really means. And we become very literal when it comes to this. Yeah.
An alternative theory is people say, well, Jesus was talking to the Jews.
Right.
He was talking to the Pharisees, and he was basically saying, if you think you're going to become righteous by following all these things, what I'm preaching to you is not changing any of that.
Right.
But then also trying to point out you can't get there
Just by doing that.
It's impossible. Humans cannot follow all the law.
So what's the big deal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so can you pick and choose? That's where it always becomes interesting, right? Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, I support what Elder Chada said. That's the book of Matthew chapter 5:17 that says 17 and 18. Matthew 5:17, 18. Don't misunderstand why I've come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to fulfill them. 18, I assure you, until heaven and earth disappear, even the smallest detail of God's law will remain until its purpose is achieved. Now let's go back to what you said, and what I went through yesterday.
Yeah.
For the Ten Commandments, we always say they are divided into two, according to the way we translate it. The first four, they are meant to honor God. And the last six, they are meant for us on how we have a relationship amongst ourselves. Exodus 23, that's 10 commandments, in prayer with Jesus' commandment. Exodus 23, it says, do not worship any other gods beside me. And then Jesus, Matthew 4:10, he said, you must worship the Lord your God, serve him only. Exodus 24, it says, do not make idols of any kind. Luke 16:13, Jesus said, no one can serve two masters.
Yeah.
And then Exodus 27, the Ten Commandments says, do not misuse the name of the Lord your God. And then Matthew chapter 5:34, Jesus said, but I say, do not make any vows if you say, by heaven. It's a sacred vow because heaven is God's throne. Exodus 28, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Then Mark chapter 2, 27 and 28, it says the Sabbath was made to benefit people and not people to benefit the Sabbath. And I, the Son of Man, I am the master, I'm master even of the Sabbath. Exodus 20:12, honor your father and mother. Matthew 10:37, if you love your mother or father, if you love your father or mother more than you love me, you are not worthy of being mine. Exodus 20:13, do not murder. Matthew 5:22, if you are angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. Exodus 20:14, do not commit adultery. Matthew 5:28, the one you see, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust in his eye, he has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Exodus 20:15, do not steal. If you are ordered, that's Matthew 5:40, if you are ordered to court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. And then second last, Exodus 20:16, do not testify falsely against your neighbor. Matthew 12:36, you must give an account on judgment day of every idle word you speak. And finally, Exodus 20:17, do not covet. And then Luke 12:15, do not be greedy for what you don't have. So we can see the way the Ten Commandments were and the way Jesus was trying to explain to the people how they're supposed to observe them. So that's why you see, I never came to change any of these.
Right.
But they're meant for you to observe them because those are the guidelines. They might be the rules, they might be the laws, the way you look at it, but they're the ones to guide us. It's the same thing to the Constitution. The Constitution, most of the time you look at it, it's almost in line with what the Bible says. It's not far away. Otherwise, they have them so that we can be more responsible with our behavior, with our characters. That's why somebody steals from me, I wouldn't be able to want to ask him, because if I ask him, maybe come with a gun and shot me. So instead that you go to jail, if that's the scenario, if that's another Christian, somebody who doesn't understand, you say, hey, somebody messed up with me, then the law takes its own course. So it depends how we look at it. But as Christians, let's observe these laws as something that helps us to observe what God has what to do. Otherwise, if we don't, then we are being misled.
Thank you. And as you're sharing through those, it was bringing to my mind as well where Christianity is in this perspective of Old Covenant and New Covenant and these types of things. And what you just read and illustrated was the idea of those 10 Commandments being consistent throughout, whether it was the Old or the New. What is interesting is how much of these persist. The ones that are in today's lesson, how much of them persist, and so it's not changed, as it were. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, and those are the ones that you always get in Bible class,
Yep.
where they say, here's how it compares
How it
and
relates.
fits. But then there's all these extras in Exodus that I still go back to the point of, we don't follow them, right? And
Right.
so it is interesting how, we pick and choose.
We pick and choose.
Yes.
But how many of those, and is there verses, and I don't have them ready for this, but that Jesus talks to or discusses in the New Testament to try to say, this is what I meant by eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, or etc. In fact, I would say, because I was headed down the slavery route here a little bit, where Jesus talks about there is no difference between free man and slave, Jew and Gentile, any of that in the new covenant. We were with the Jews. This was the whole deal to get this understood before I came. Now that I'm here, it's going to the Gentiles as well. And when it goes to the Gentiles, it's a very different situation. It's not a group of people, right? It's not a nation led by God. It is now the whole world. In fact, that's what we're looking for, is when this is given to the whole world. Well, what is this? What is the this here, right? And that's where I think even our church kind of walks into this at times when, we're the last remnant. We're the last generation Jewish, we're spiritual Israel. That's what I'm looking for, right? We're not literal Israel, we're spiritual Israel. And somehow we also create a whole bunch of rules because, and is that really what it's about here?
That's the temptation at the end of Exodus 23. There
Yes.
is that section that's beyond where the lesson went, where it says, if you do this, you will be blessed. Your animals won't die, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I think everybody's really tempted to look at that and say, okay, well, if I just follow all these rules, then God will bless me. But Jesus said, if you follow me, you're actually going to be hated and persecuted. So,
In fact, to his apostles, he said, "You will be martyred. You're gonna die." No, there's no other way to put it, right? You're gonna die for this. It is an interesting perspective. So, what is this talking about? Is it talking about literal Israel in these situations, and that's why it applies to them? And that's where it feels like yes, because when you continue on the story as we keep going through Exodus, we see how this turned out, right? That doesn't necessarily apply to us, because we're not that. But the principles are there. And so when I was reading this about the slavery, and I don't mean to minimize this, what I'm about to say, but it is interesting, and it talks about this in the lesson, where it says servitude was limited to 6 years. And then they were liberated. Again, hard to understand culturally what that all means. But again, if you read those, it said, but if you're liberated and you said, no, I want to stay, then you stayed. To me, I'm pretty sure my boss isn't listening, but if you are, you'll understand, I'm sure, because we have a good relationship. I sometimes have my moments where I'm in servitude, right? I make this agreement, I sign this contract. That's what we do today. But then it changes, right? I have the opportunity, like it says here, to do something different. In this rule, it was X years. Makes sense if you're working the land and this is what you're doing and this is how you want it to happen. But you still have a lot of the freedoms that will come. You work for and then you can get. Again, not trying to compare to what we saw in the most recent years, but this is how it was supposed to be, because comparatively, was that the rule of the surrounding nations? And that's the part I was looking up, and it was like, no. This was the whole deal when Jacob is sold into slavery. It wasn't, just for 6 years and then you'll be free. Or there wasn't a year of Jubilee where you could reset and make it right. This was forever. This was the difference. This was a change, and it's not a wholesale change that's going to happen. It's a progression in that. It's no different in this country when slavery was outlawed, but there was still a need for a civil rights movement 100 years later, because, well, that's just on paper. How does it actually apply? And we're still working on that to find that equality and that equity. But here, that's what I see, and I'm not, again, not trying to make a direct comparison, but it's the idea of there's something different here. This is going to be different than what you know. And they knew slavery because they were slaves. That's the point. Did you like that? Well, then why would you do that even to your own countrymen? Because that's who was being enslaved. And it's an interesting perspective. And we honestly don't see that in this country if you're in a situation where you get to choose your job. But that's not always the case either. Everybody always says, oh, anybody can grow up and be president. But not everybody can grow up and be president. There aren't that many options for you to get there, right? So it's not completely free. The opportunity is there, but it doesn't mean you'll have that. And so some individuals are very much stuck with X or stuck with Y because of circumstances, but there's still the possibility. And that's what this is talking about. Don't take away that hope. Don't take away that possibility. There's always this chance and freedom in God. And that's what the principle is supposed to be about. It wasn't, oh, you're here and you can never get there, or you're there and you can never change. No, you are with God in your circumstances, and He can make it different. Tuesdays, listen, I know we're out of time, talks about God's original plan, and I think that's a very good perspective to look at, because even in what we've discussed, God didn't want this to have to be a big deal for them, because He was just going to take care of it. But the people showed pretty quick who they were, right? By making their golden image, by rejecting God. Even Moses, the guy he was on the mountain talking with, disobeyed Him. So it's not God trying to hold us down, it's God dealing with the reality of us living in sin. And I think if we see it that realm, we understand what this is about as we continue. The last part there was interesting. I think maybe I ran out of time on purpose. Not really, it just happened. But I don't know how to deal with vengeance. Other than, I don't want to. maybe that's an older man perspective and not going out to conquer the world anymore. But it's just like, I don't know. I read this and I think there is something to be said about, peace, providing opportunity, support. It says they needed the facts first. I think for me, this was all about innocent till proven guilty when I was reading this one, to be honest. You think something happened, you're sure something happened. It's like, take a breath, pause, make sure that you know what's going on. Not the vigilante, not all the things that we have seen in human history. It's letting the emotions happen, but don't let them control your actions. That's why you have what we call sober judges to think through the process. So to take a step back, work through it, don't react in your emotional state, which is good advice for all of us. So it'd be interesting to see where we go next week as we continue to look at some of these laws and commandments and how they tie in and what applies to us today. Let's pray as we close. Father, thank you again for caring so much about us that you want to clearly make statements, rules, laws, whatever commandments, whatever we want to call them, to help us in this journey. Because if left to our own devices, our own human sinful desires, there would be no hope. And we are just so thankful, Lord, that you're a merciful God, you're a just God, you're a patient God, you're a God who is not just a being out there. You can be our Father, our friend, our comforter, all the words you've described, all the words we've experienced, hopefully. Help us to continue to lean into you and encourage and lift each other up as we walk this journey towards your kingdom. In your name, amen.